Look, we all know there are a ton of fad diets out there, and I'm sure you've all heard of one famous one. It's called keto. But not only has it been touted as a weight loss godsend, it's actually now showing a ton of promise in treating chronic illness conditions such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and even autoimmune diseases. But there's a big risk. Hi, my name is Ryan, and I have a chronic illness called small fiber neuropathy. Recently, I sat down with doctor, author, and MS destroyer, Dr. Terry Wahls, who reversed her MS through diet and some level of ketosis, and now she's studying it on the effects of other diseases. And what she found is some benefits and some pitfalls. This is what she had to say. I have watched a documentary called The Magic Pill on Netflix, which is about ketosis. And something that my mother, who is a teacher, notices in her classrooms over the last 30 years of teaching, she's had an increasing number of kids with allergies, anxiety problems, even certain chronic illnesses. And I was wondering, is this because of the environment that we currently raise children in, what we feed them, all of these different factors?
I agree that we've changed the environment. And if you look at photos from 100 years ago, the adults and the children look very differently. They look much more lean, much more appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
We've becoming steadily more overweight and obese. Our children are steadily more overweight and obese. They have higher rates of mental health problems,
Right.
Higher rates of learning problems, higher rates of obesity, diabetes, autoimmune disease.
We've seen this emergence over the last 50 to 100 years of chronic illnesses being the predominant illnesses among the general public, which didn't necessarily plague people hundreds of years ago. They didn't die of like chronic diabetes or all of these things.
Correct. It's hard to get people to give up today's pleasures for tomorrow's benefits. We are biologically wired to crave salt, sugar, fat, inactivity, immediate pleasure. Our food industry has been able to hire food scientists to design products that create that craving, that dependency, that relative addiction. And then we change our recommendations. We went low fat. That made vegetables more bitter. The food industry compensated by adding sugar and more sugar and realized like that sold better. And so we ended up creating a food system that is depleting our health. And we allowed this advertising to young children. So we're down this path of steadily declining health because we created steadily declining health behaviors in dietary patterns.
When we look at this, that is something that they address in the documentary Magic Pill, and they go to Australia and meet with the Aboriginal people who are developing all these chronic illnesses over the last 30 years. And they're trying to figure out why. It's because they've introduced a Western style diet to their life, which before they were not doing. So they did a test and they basically reintroduced what they originally ate, and they noticed that they better manage these conditions. And so that was the test that they did, and they used ketosis. And you mentioned ketosis in your book in the third part of the diet if you're implementing Wales Paleo Plus. And so I wanted you to just in a 1 minute or so explain kind of what ketosis is.
We store carbs in our body in something called glycogen. And when we've run out of that, then we begin to burn the fat in our body. Ketone bodies show up and we're in ketosis. You run out of the glycogen either through long endurance exercise, it takes about 2 hours, or because you didn't eat. If you go without food for 12 to 16 hours, you're out of your glycogen and you're in ketosis. So many of us are in ketosis overnight. And it used to be our ancestral mothers and fathers were in ketosis on the basis of physical activity because it took that much work to go get the food.
Mm-hmm.
So they're in ketosis a lot. Then after they got the food back, they'd sit down and they'd prepare and they'd have several days of eating. So they're in the fed state. Then once again, they have to go back out, work hard to get the food. So they're in ketosis because of the physical activity. This being in ketosis as a result of a very high fat diet, that's a very new way for humans to get into ketosis. It's only relatively recently that we've discovered this, and only relatively recently have we been able to access the high fat foods. Our ancestors would have been eating plants and animals.
And so what you've been finding is that there's been quite a bit of success, especially in neurodegenerative diseases, being in ketosis. So I wanted you to discuss kind of what you've been finding in your trials with that, and maybe what the long-term danger that you may have found with that is.
So we have many studies that have shown benefits of ketosis for getting control of seizure disorder, memory loss. There are some interesting studies for anxiety and depression. A couple of studies for MS that have shown it to be beneficial. being studied now for diabetes, fatty liver disease, and polycystic ovarian disease. There are many studies showing it's beneficial for cancer, brain cancer, and other solid cancers. Now, historically, if you look at the 6 million years that humans have been separate from primates, we've been in ketosis intermittently on the basis of either physical activity or transient reduced availability of food. Beginning 100 years ago, we started doing some work with ketosis using a high-fat diet. We don't have any historical individuals or societies that have been in ketosis for the rest of their life as adults. As a result, I don't know how safe it is for you to say you can be in ketosis forever. I'm hesitant to say that to the public. I can feel very comfortable saying you can be in ketosis seasonally during every winter. I think doing it episodically each day, each week, or each month, I think that would be fine. If we have this long-term signal, which when you're in ketosis, that tells my body and my cells that there's not enough nutrition. So I begin making some hormonal changes to cope with not enough nutrition. And I lose salts in my blood out the urine. I decrease my sex hormones. I decrease my thyroid hormones. There may be negative health consequences for that. However, having said that, there are times clinically where I will still, there are these potential risks, but because of your clinical condition, I think it's worth considering long-term ketosis. But we should watch you closely.
You mentioned neuropathy as something, and there are some 30 million people in the United States that have some form of neuropathy, whether it's diabetic. 30% of them are idiopathic, meaning they have no idea why they have it. For people like that, would you say there is a benefit?
Well, so the folks with neuropathy, I would sort of lump that into all the neurologic dysfunction and the autoimmune issues. I would want to put them on level 1, level 2 of my diet, get at least homocysteine, vitamin D, and probably a careful exam to look for other nutrients, minerals, and B vitamins that might be a problem, and then decide, is this a nutritional depletion that I can easily correct? We find that many neuropathies are deeply connected to a nutritional depletion and will in fact respond well to diet and targeted nutrient supplements. Some we can't solve that way. And then I would consider putting them on my elimination diet next and see how they do. And then after that, and then I'd put them on a ketogenic diet. So it's certainly in the lineup of things that I would consider.
It's going through the process.
But I want to go through the process because if it turns out that the problem was nutritional, that's what solves it. They might feel better on ketosis for a little while,
right?
But it didn't get to the correct root cause.
Right.
So any benefit they get would be temporary.
If you want to know more, all links to Dr. Terry Wahls are down in the description below. If you want to talk more to me, hit me up on my Instagram at Ryan Mitchell Brown, and I'll see you in the next one.